everybody. I'm Jolene Moore. I'm the director here at Ada Public Library. And a couple of years ago, we applied for a grant for the American and the Holocaust exhibit that was through the American Library Association and the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum. We were awarded that. We didn't think we would be because we were competing with some really big places. In fact, one of the next ones I go to is Baylor. So Baylor and Ada, Oklahoma. We love the combination. And in the process, we had, Sarah and Susan had talked to me in the past about the project they were doing in Rewind. And in that, we kind of developed a partnership in which they decided that, hey, let's do some research into our local history regarding the time here in Ada and Pontotoc County and surrounding areas during the Holocaust and World War II. And they have a phenomenal presentation and exhibit that coincides with the museum exhibit. So they're going to talk about their exhibit. They have allowed plenty of time for Q&A, which I'm sure you're going to have plenty of questions. And then we'll go down to then you can explore the exhibit, both of them, and we actually have refreshments down there for everybody to enjoy. Again, thank you for coming out and supporting the library and supporting East Central University. We all appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, so I'll kick it off. My name is Sarah Engel, and I teach mostly photography and some art history and photography-related computer software at East Central University. I've had an interest in documentary and historical research intersecting with photographic practice for many, many years. And the project that Susan and I started, Ada Rewind, Pause, Fast Forward, really started when I'd lived here for about 2 years. I moved here about 7.5 years ago, and I'd gone, I don't know anywhere except the gym and my house and the school, and I go in this little circuit of my gym and the house and the school and my gym, right? And I would like to know where I landed, a little bit more about the community, find out what Ada is about, how it came to be. And so Susan and I embarked on this, what was originally just a rephotography project, where we looked at the idea of looking at historical photos, for instance, of Ada, Oklahoma, and looking at those sites as they exist today. So you can still tell this is Ada Main Street, right? So this is from 1942, I believe, and it looks a little different today, but actually not that much. The cars are a little different. But it's really fascinating to me in rephotography how we can see those changes evolve over time or not in our community. And so it started as a rephotography project and then very quickly evolved into much more involving oral histories, involving the interview process with longtime Aidens, involving historical media from those longtime Aidens, such as the Katz family. And we've just learned so much. And then, of course, Jolene, having secured this grant and inviting us to be a part of it, really focused our research on the World War II era for the last few years. So basically, we'll begin with everyday life in Ada during the World War II era and look at several topics after that. So one of the first things that happened during the World War II era in Ada is that the airport north of town was increased in its capacity. It was definitely developed a lot more than it had been, and it was built up as part of our national defense system so that people training here, pilots, training cadets at ECU, could have some place to fly because obviously their training involved flight. And so that was a huge part, and the airport remains to this day a huge part of our community. And you can see the blueprints here from 1942 from the Ada Evening News showing how the airport construction would evolve to what we know more contemporarily as our airport today. And so there was a large military presence here in Ada, mostly in the form of Army cadets training and Air Force cadets training at this airport. And you can see the approval here given in the Ada Evening News from Sunday, June 22nd, 1941. So very early on, you can see that we have headlines, obviously Hitler orders war on Russia, right? We're seeing those headlines happening in the news. And then simultaneously we're seeing that development locally of how that's impacting Aiden's and the presence of these armed forces in Ada. So there were daily interactions between the cadets and locals. We have some lovely interviews with folks like Henry Katz, with a couple of our other subjects who have since passed, Billy Floyd and Ann Scott, mentioning their interactions as children in Ada, with these armed forces who came to train here. And then also many Ada residents served in the U.S. military as well. As we can see in this slide, there would be publications through the Ada News. You're starting to see a theme here. A lot of our content and information and narrative is built from some very deep dive research that primarily Susan was in charge of as the one with the newspapers.com account. And we can start to put together this narrative of how Ada responded, where people were serving, who was in the war, who was reporting back what they were doing, where they were serving, what was going on in their lives overseas. And then it would be published in the Ada News. And then, interestingly, at the same time, here in the United States, we had about 120,000 Japanese Americans incarcerated in really harsh conditions in internment camps. And fear and prejudice was widespread in the United States against the Japanese, and even in Ada. And so one of the most profound articles that was just kind of, to me, like flabbergasted me, was even in Ada, there was this couple who were Filipino, who were house workers, just labor for a couple, in-house labor. And they had to publish an article saying, they are not Japanese, please stop harassing them. It's just, that sentiment was here as well as anywhere else in our country. And I think it's an important part of that war that isn't maybe talked about as much. And of course, East Central University, and sorry for the typo, that should say World War II. That is my bad. Do not trust me to proofread. Yep, me too. So World War II, out of one. So of course we have a profound effect on East Central as well, because so many of the young men are going off to war. And one of the most interesting things in this particular article I found was that they found a way to try to get students through in 3 years instead of 4 by creating an entire 12-week summer semester so that they could just keep going year-round, and then by the time they're 20, they can leave, have a degree, and go into the armed forces. That, yeah, and my dean's here tonight. He's just going, that sounds awful. We need summer break. But it had that effect. And then teachers also and staff had said that they would, in this article, dedicate part of their salaries to buy war bonds to support the war effort as well. Also impacted post-World War II by this is the architecture we still see today on East Central's campus. So you'll notice, if you have been to East Central lately, that is still the Memorial Student Union. It was built after World War II, designed by local architect Albert Ross to honor ECU students who served and died in the war, hence Memorial Student Union. And it was, and still is, a hub for student life on our university's campus. So, yeah, so this is where we switch out.
Okay, well, break a minute here. My name is Susan Ingram, and I also work at East Central University in the same department with Sarah, art design, media, and communication. My background is more in advertising, public relations, journalism, and media writing. And I love history and I love doing research. And so being able to combine that with digital technology and humanities and writing has just been a dream come true for me. So, and I'm multi-generational to this area. So, of course, looking up Ada's history is just important to me. So, that being said, moving on to women in the military, a lot of times when we think about World War I and even World War II, we don't think about the fact that women were involved in one way or the other. So more than 350,000 American women joined the United States Armed Forces during World War II. That's quite a big number. And of that, 432 died and 88 were taken prisoner. So I also made this slide here. So these are the different areas of the armed services that women could serve in. Some of you, I'm sure, are familiar with the WWIIs, the WAVES. I had never heard of the SPARs until I started doing this. It was the Coast Guard. WASP were women pilots. And then, of course, a lot of women served in different military branches as nurses, as part of the nursing corps. Another thing is, as far as Oklahoma goes itself, an interesting fact is that at OSU, Oklahoma State University, during this time, they were the site of a WWII training program. And so during the war, they trained over 10,000 women to go into the WWII at OSU. So I thought that was a little bit interesting. However, Ada women also served. We've identified at least 12, I'm sure there's more, at least 12 from Ada that enlisted in various branches of the armed services. Probably the most recognizable in name is Margaret Kerr. She was the niece of Governor Kerr. And she actually learned to fly as part of the civilian air program that was hosted at ECU. And so after she got her pilot's wings through that program, she joined up and became an actual pilot during the war. We know there are other women from the local area and communities. Time was our enemy on this, right? We kept researching and finally said, we have to stop and put stuff together. So I would like to personally continue this, look more into these 12 women that we know and find out about their lives. But I would also like to know more about women from the surrounding areas that served in Pontotoc County and maybe Conowal and things like that. Okay, going back to ECU, again, the male students left and they signed up, and even male teachers left, but female college students also signed up and served. And they were actually marketed to pretty heavily. This is from the ECU Journal in 1943, and it's specifically to college women in their senior year. They ran a whole series of these ads trying to get college women to join the services. One, the library assistant for Lynchide Library, well, it wasn't Lynchide Library at the time, but one library assistant for the ECU Library, she actually left and joined up the armed services. So I thought that was interesting. Also, the journal would publish anytime a recent alumni would join up in the armed services, or if a student would leave and join, even if they weren't from Ada. So going through the ECU Journal, you can see how many female students and male students took off and enlisted in the war. On the home front, I don't know how well you guys can see this ad, but it's one of my favorites. It was actually from Anthony's, but they're saying, we salute the WWII's, WAC, SPARs, and Marines, but the important women on the home front are the wives. Because they were here, right? They were left behind to take care of everything. So they played vital roles. A lot of women joined the workforce that had not been open to them before. The Douglas Aircraft plant in Midwest City, their workforce was over 50% female during the war. So women would move to where they could get jobs. And those that stayed behind, they took care of the children, they took care of the elderly, they earned money. They led civic initiatives to help the war effort, including trying to sell war bonds, collect scrap metal. And then the other thing they did, a major effort, was food security. The effort that they had to put forward to raise victory gardens and canning and just keeping everyday life afloat and going. It was up to the women. So, can we switch again? Yes.
We'll be doing this many times.
Yeah.
And so one of those portions of the work of those here on the home front was to figure out how to deal with rationing. So rations were on things like sugar, meat, gasoline, rubber, and people figured out creative cooking techniques, carpooling, not going as far to get what one needed. And newspapers, again, our research led us to newspapers, had a lot of interesting ideas for people through how to get ration books to how to create recipes with what rations one did have. And we have so many really interesting ads we've found throughout supporting the war effort through like supermarkets, for instance. This one is titled Be Thrifty in 43 and showing, you know, what is available at that particular market. And there were scrap drives as well that collected metal, rubber, paper, even silk and nylon hosiery, as seen in the article on your left here, where boxes were placed in Ada businesses to collect any scrap silk or nylon that people might have for the war effort. And then this poster is more of a typical United States publication from the War Department or the War Board, and just saying, you know, how many pounds of rubber a gas mask requires and why this sort of scrap drive effort was necessary. Another important part of this work was victory gardens. And I am a gardener, so this part I probably went down a very deep rabbit hole on, and I absolutely adored. If there was an area I'd like to go into more, it was probably this, and trying to find the actual sites in Ada if I could, to figure out where some of them were. But there were many from our research victory gardens here in Ada, and these were gardens grown in people's backyards, vacant lots, public spaces. And they supplemented limited food supplies or rationed supplies during World War II, especially for fresh produce and vegetables. And they also symbolized resilience, patriotism, and community spirit. They were a communal effort. And we, again, in our newspaper research, saw so many articles about, for instance, a seed and plant exchange from a garden club here in Ada, and then ads from different corporations like the Oklahoma Gas and Electric Company ad you see on your left here, talking about how you can start your own victory garden. This was one of my favorite articles, was that victory garden were sometimes made out of vacant lots here in Ada, and those lots were made available by the city for people to be able to plant these gardens. I did not include my actual favorite, but there is on the poster in the other room an article about how some of these victory gardens were trampled by dogs one time. So if you want to go see the posters, you can read that one as well. And there was a lot of guidance for first-time gardeners, so people who may want to participate but never had gardened in their life before are now finding themselves needing to do so. And so publications and newspapers were given to people like freely, just information of how you can even do this. There were also communities coming together to preserve this food. So I love this photo in this article on the right. It's a little grainy, but it's of women primarily working in a canning facility in Allen that was a community facility. They came together to can all of this fresh produce they had grown. All right. And then, of course, there was a lot of media support and public enthusiasm as well. And again, ads for things like seeds and tools and canning supplies. And the coverage really reflected the local popularity of victory gardening. This is where we switch once more.
My turn. Okay. So this section is about the old Armory National Guard, or as a lot of people know it, what the heck is that weird looking building across from the Agriplex, right? That's how it's referred to a lot. But it was actually originally the National Guard Armory. It was built, it actually opened in 1937. It was a project of the Works Progress Administration. It provided jobs for local men in the area. And it was built as a nationwide effort to build armories all across the United States. If you drive down to Roth, they have one that looks almost identical, except it's backwards. Like it's different orientation. I also believe there's one in Allen that looks similar. So you can see these all throughout small towns, not just in Oklahoma, but everywhere. So, and so while it was built for the armory or for the military, it soon became a hub for the community. Because really, when you think about it, up to this point in Ada, this was the first time you had a major facility that you could do large events, right? And it was a place for the community together. And it was right across from the fairgrounds, which of course we had the rodeo during the 40s that was hugely popular. And so it was a great overflow space, not just for cattle shows and the rodeo, but also for other things. So they used it like for school programs. The Cub Scouts used it, the Girl Scouts used it, boxing matches, I love that one, concerts, auto shows. And of course, in a minute we'll talk about Horseshoe Ranch, but they had cattle shows there as well. But to me, the most interesting thing was it was a skating rink. So on certain days of the week, it was used as a skating rink. And Marcia's going, yes, I remember. It was a skating rink, I believe, like for a long, long time. And interesting enough, this is an image of a sticker on here that I found online. It's very fragile. You see a bigger image of it on the poster in there, but also the actual sticker itself is framed in the exhibit room. So it was just one of those random finds. I was like, wait a minute. That's an Ada skating rink, armory? And I'm like, I don't know, but I thought it was really cool. And then we verified, yes, it was a skating rink. However, as time goes on, the building was used for a long time, but by the early 70s, the military needs had changed. They were building the new armory, which is out by the airport. So the military would still use the old one in like a limited capacity. But in 1974, there was a natural gas explosion and it did some major damage. So on the side closest to Pruitt, you see the open bins that used to be building. And the military decided they didn't want to fix it because they were no longer really using that building. So today, it is owned by the city of Ada. If you wonder where they keep all the beautiful Christmas lights that are at the park, that is where. They're in that building. They're in the big open floor of that building. But it's also really cool in there. And Lisa Bratcher's not here. And I think we forgot to put her name on the thank you list. She was very gracious and has let us go through that building on more than one occasion. She probably thinks we're weird for wanting to go through this old rundown building. But you can see some photos there. One of the most interesting things is some of the back rooms. You can see remnants of when it was still used as an armory. So here you have some old army cots. All the wooden crates, they're full of medical supplies. Some of them we think are from World War II. Some might be from Korea. But gas mask filters. An X-ray machine that's never been used.
Like a field X-ray machine.
Yeah, field kits. So it's, she was very patient with us going through there.
And she also allowed, I just need to shout out to Lisa, she allowed me to take an intermediate photography class with like 20 students and they had to photograph one day as well.
Yeah. So, and then I like the photo of just the empty room. You can really see the rock there and the architecture. So if you look around, you can still see what it was once used for. The next topic, which goes along with the armory, was prisoners of war in Oklahoma. How many of you knew that there were prisoners of war held in Oklahoma? Good. More of you than what I thought, so that makes me happy. So, from 1942 to 46, there were over 425,000 German POWs in the U.S. Now, there were also POWs from Italy and from Japan. But Oklahoma had up to 35 installations with about 20,000 prisoners, primarily from Germany. From North Africa is where they served. So the prisoners of war in the United States, they were governed by the Geneva Convention. We followed those rules. So humane treatment was required, which meant you have to feed them and feed them well. This caused some consternation with the public because we're still coming out of the Depression and we're having rationing for the war effort, and so people can't get things, but yet they're feeding German prisoners better than the local community. They also, it was optional if they wanted to work or not. They didn't have to work. If they worked, they got paid $1.80 a day. But some of them did not want to work because they felt like they were aiding their enemy. And that's why they would opt out. So what did they do in Oklahoma? Agricultural work, of course, right? Mainly. Factory labor, public works and construction projects. For example, the Lake Texoma. POWs, they built the dam and they helped clear the land that became the lake. So if next time you go to Lake Texoma, you need to realize, you can remember, oh yeah, German POWs helped build that. We have that lake now, which I thought that was cool. Yes?
In the Ben Museum down in Tishomingo, they have a stool that was made by a German POW prisoner from the Tishomingo POW camp.
Awesome. Good to know. I guess we'll be making a trip. So where were they located? So the closest camp to us, big camp, was McAllister. It was one of the original ones, one of the first. But we had a small branch camp here at Conowall, just over the river. They were housed at the Conowall National Guard. How many of you knew that there were swastika symbols on the Conowall National Guard? Yeah. It was built in the 30s, again, as part of the National Guard Armory movement in the Works Progress Administration. And of course, this was pre-rise of Hitler. The swastika did not mean, at the time, what we know it today. So, kind of ironic, though, that the German prisoners of war were staying in a building with swastikas on them. I'd like to know what they thought. Like, are we in Oklahoma or are we in Germany? Anyways, so this building, and it's in the little park in Conowall, they had a fenced-in area as well. It held about 150 prisoners, which is a lot. At the height, they had up to 300 prisoners in this building. So it was crowded conditions. I found a lot of articles where they were working at peanut farms in the area, those that were stationed in Conowall. Moving on, Horseshoe Ranch. And also we have special guests here tonight, some of the Buxton family members who were gracious enough to help us with this part and talk to us. They were probably like, why are these weird ladies wanting to talk about our property? Now they know. So Horseshoe Ranch is between Rolfe and Sulphur. It's a beautiful area out there. The land is gorgeous. But it is a historic ranch. It was here before their family owned it. It was here before statehood. They still own part of the ranch today. But during the wartime, 20 German POWs lived at the ranch. They stayed in a 2-story ranch house, and they had one guard with them. They helped with daily labor at the ranch. They helped build things and just odd jobs. One apparently attempted to escape. He didn't realize that Mexico was far away, So he found out really quickly that it was. The interesting part of it, well, all of it's interesting, but the really interesting part is the Buxton family, their parents, they maintain a relationship with one of the former POWs after the war. And on the poster in there, you will see a photo of those children of that prisoner. They talked, basically the mother left with the kids and didn't have anything. They were refugees in their own country during the war, and they just remained a close working relationship. And they even went to go visit the family, Beth, I believe in 1959, and then y'all's parents in the 70s. So it's really interesting. And like I said, on that poster, you can listen to audio clips, them telling the story in their own words, rather than me butchering it up here. So this is a flyer, a sale brochure from the ranch in 1945. This was the height of what is known as Hereford Heaven. This whole area south of here was ranching country. There were several huge ranches at the time. The ranch was so big, it had its own community, it had its own schoolhouse. And that's that's another area we would like to go further into, is more of the ranches in Hereford Heaven and that whole era of the cattle industry. So, yeah. And again, thank you to the Buxton family for sharing their story with us and the information and photos. Okay.
I've got to move those slides along here. All right. So one of the most fascinating and unlikely stories to come out of this project is this collection of letters that we received one day randomly on the doorstep of the Historical Society about a year ago. And I'm skipping ahead a little, but now I realize this is the place to start with this story. So basically one day Susan goes to check on, it was Marion. I got the story wrong. It was Marion, but you're our president of our Historical and Genealogical Society here in Pontotoc County, discovered this kind of wet package on a rainy November, December day. And it was full of correspondence between Bud Newland and his sister Mary, who were 20-somethings in Ada during World War II and who both served. And they had been found by a man who was at a flea market in Washington State. The likelihood of these letters coming to the right place at the right time and not being rained on so hard that they failed to exist anymore was unlikely, to say the least. And so I found it quite fascinating that we were able to, especially with the help of our intern, who's also here tonight, Mallory, in the second row here, go through these letters, parse this correspondence, put together the story of these two people's lives. So Bud Newland, James Donald Bud Newland, was 20 when he enlisted, and he was an Ada High School graduate. He'd had 2 years at East Central University, and he enlisted 20 days after Pearl Harbor. He trained at Brooksfield, Kellyfield, Miami Beach, and he served in Great Britain and then mostly in North Africa. And these letters are just stunning. They're so gorgeous. I hope if you look at one poster tonight, you go to the back of the room in there and look at the letters. You can also, there's a QR code later in the presentation on the poster where you can see these online. The collection is online at the Pontotoc County Historical and Genealogical Society website. But they had this beautiful and steady correspondence between these two siblings. And mostly the collection we have is mostly Bud. There are a couple letters from Mary, but we get the references from Bud's letters back and forth that they are corresponding with one another. He's very fun and playful, despite the fact that this is wartime. There is much stress coming through in these letters as well. There's jokes about British rations and daily life, and the topics in the letters include things like gossip and family matters and what they might do after the war, and sometimes just simple things like where Bud went out at night in Great Britain. And I mean, these are 20-year-olds. They're out doing things that 20-year-olds do. There are several references to had a little too much drink and all of that. But they also, talk about films and music and celebrity. And so they really give us this human portrait of what it was like just as a human, a young human experiencing World War II, and trying to stay grounded during the war. This is one of my favorite letters here on your right, actually your left, there we go, because you can see where it's been redacted. So each one of the envelopes that we have in this collection is so cool that we have the envelopes for a lot of these. You can see that they were read first by the War Office before they could allow anything to go out, right? Their letters are being read and edited and redacted or not sent if they contain sensitive information. And so this particular letter, it got through, but it literally has cuts where pieces of information were cut out. It says, we're at blank, North Africa, right? And there are blank, probably a number, men in our unit, right? So it really shows that part of the war as well, where correspondence was being limited in ways. And tragically, Bud died in June of 1943. It took quite a while for his family here in Ada to get news of that. The details of his exact circumstances of death are very unclear. And it kind of even a harder hit to the family. His sister had been planning to enter service as well. She joined the Waves, and it was just merely days after her family found out about his death that she enlisted officially in the Waves. And then their younger brother, Richard, also enlisted shortly thereafter. So all three of the Newland siblings served our country. And we have yet to find any relatives. I would be just so thrilled if anyone knows anyone who might know anyone who was related to the Newlands who might still be somewhere on this planet. There has to be somebody. We want to go on a deeper dive here. And so it's just lovely to be able to put together this story between Mallory's research, seeing these letters together, writing a lovely piece about them on the poster in the other room, and also research through again, Ada News. We were able to really put together their story and preserve it. And so again, the preservation, these are part of the Pontotoc County Historical and Genealogical Society collection, both as physical primary sources and now digitized sources available through this QR code on our website online. All right. So now we'll move into the Jewish community of Ada and the surrounding communities. And right here we have one of the favorite images from the collection that is of the B'nai B'rith conference goers here in Ada in 1940. So beginning in the late 19th century, Jewish families moved into what would become Oklahoma for three primary reasons. There was economic opportunity, there were the openings of new towns along rail lines, and that created retail possibilities. There was regional trade networks established that Jewish merchants often followed in order to expand their businesses, and those were routes expanding north from Texas largely, so we can see how we landed in Ada from that fairly easily if you've ever driven through this town. There's a million trains a day. Land runs and new settlements also opened up new towns. And so by the 1890s, 1910s, Jewish communities existed in lots of places in Oklahoma, including Ardmore, Chickasha, Muskogee, Tulsa, Oklahoma City, and of course smaller places like Ada. And Ada's Jewish presence fits this broader pattern. Because the Jewish community was small, though, Ada did not have a synagogue or year-round official religious leadership. And families met in homes for Jewish holidays often. The newspaper, again, if we go back and do our research in the newspapers, that was widely talked about, though, and they published many of the events, the services being held, who attended, and so there was a lively, if small, Jewish community here from very early on. And services were sometimes led by lay people, which in small Jewish communities is common. And for major life events, Jewish people would travel to bar mitzvahs, weddings, funerals, often to larger cities with synagogues like Seminole, Ardmore, Oklahoma City, Tulsa, or Dallas. During the 30s to 50s, and this is quoting Henry Katz, who we have over here. We're so glad Henry could join us tonight. So to quote Henry Katz here from an article he wrote in the 2010s. During the 30s to the early 50s, probably the high point in Jewish population, we had an active B'nai B'rith organization which met in members' homes. During World War II, the Army Corps trained pilots at our local college, East Central University. Some of these cadets were Jewish, and the community did their best to provide for them. And again, you can see on your left, sorry, I can't get the left and right? Your right, the article, again, another article showing some of the goings on in the small rural towns. This one is particularly about a Jewish neighborhood meeting in McAllister that had representatives from the Jewish communities of 14 small congregations throughout rural Oklahoma. And so this research to me was really fascinating. And again, to quote Henry Katz, one of those years we celebrated the High Holy Days in a borrowed Baptist church and had a student rabbi in from the HUC in Cincinnati. That student was Joseph Levinson, now of Oklahoma City. He stayed the entire period and took all his meals with local families. Also during that period, we had a Seder in the dining room of the First Christian Church. Eli Stein conducted the service and I read the 4 questions. And you can see Joseph Levinson as a rabbi in Oklahoma City on the far left of that photo. Oh, and I had, I meant to expand a little on the 4 questions for, and of course I have to make sure I'm pronouncing this correctly. The Mishnah are the 4 questions at Passover. So the context for that is the 4 questions are asked usually by the youngest member at the Passover Seder to speak to curiosity about the story of Passover and the Jews' escape from enslavement in Egypt. And so I love that that was just a nice anecdote about what Jewish life was like here. You know, it's a small place. We're having Jewish services at the First Christian Church. I mean, just to reiterate that, right? And I am half, by birth, half Jewish and practice also to an extent. And when I came here, I had a student go, "Oh, I've never met a Jewish person." And I'm like, there are other Jewish people here, I'm sure of it. You know, we have a whole section at Walmart. I can buy gluten-free matzah at the Ada Walmart. There had to be a Jewish population. And so when we met Henry, I was like, here we go. Let's hear the story. And so we'll talk more about the Katz family here in a moment, but that really opened my eyes to what the history of Jews in Ada was and continues to be.
Okay. Before we go to the slide, I'm going to play a very quick video clip. We decided not to do video in this lecture because we know it's already long enough, and we're trying to keep it somewhat short. But this is an interview by Henry Katz, and it's talking about what they did for Sunday school, but also about a couple in Conowall. This story about the Jewish community ended up us taking a very deep dive in Conowall and a family called the Farbs. In fact, I got a little obsessive over it, still a little obsessed over it. I've been tracing immigration records. I'm so obsessed over it. So anyways, I don't know why. But thought it'd be better just to tell this part and let Henry tell it in his own words. Maybe.
In 1938, I was 5 years old. A couple came from Poland to Conowall. Wow. They were accomplished musicians, professional musicians, and the name was Farab. And Mrs. Farab had been hired by the Kanawha School District to teach music and band in Conowall Public Schools. And she started a Sunday school for all of us kids. And we had kids from, well, there's even a family in Stonewall. But at Seminole and Shawnee, we had kids all gathered. And we had a Sunday school class. Mrs. Farr was an accomplished musician, a wonderful lady. And Mr. Farr always looked sad. When the men, they had carpools to get us over there. We went to Conowall to her house. And the men who were merchants would always sit with Mr. Farr and try to help him with his business. And one time I heard him play the violin. And boy, he was good. But that lasted, I guess, 43 or 44. And then Mr. Farr locked himself in his shop and shot himself in downtown Conway. And that was because, I didn't know, I was just a kid, but he lost touch with his family. They were all in concentration camps. And he was a victim there in Conway. And now C.B. Howard, who was the president of at that time, first national bank in England, lived in Conway. He was a little older, and he worked in the theater, which was in the same block. And he told me that he was cleaning out the theater, and he heard a gunshot. So he said, I then was cleaning out the lobby and looked up and said there was a mob trying to get in there, breaking the door down in his shop. So he witnessed it all, and he told me about it. And that ended our Sunday school.
So, like I said, a very tragic story. Maybe it makes sense why I'm so obsessed with it. But Henry tells it so well that I just wanted it to be in his words and not mine. So the story of Nathan and Bertha Eisenfarb. And I know we're running late, so I'll try to make it quick as possible. So a little bit about Bertha. Here she is, a young woman, a beautiful young woman. She's originally born in Arkansas. However, her father was from Romania. He immigrated here in 1901. Her maternal grandparents came from Germany in 1861. So even though she was born here in America, she was very much raised as part of the Jewish immigrant experience. One thing that was really unique about her, she was extremely musically talented early on. I wish I could hear her play. I wish there were some recordings of it. But she went to college and learned to be a teacher, and she wanted to teach music. Supposedly, she even played a small stint with the Oklahoma City Philharmonic, or at least that's what her obituary said. I haven't found verification other than her obituary, but I'm going to take that as fact. But in 1932, she ended up in Conway. She took a job there to teach music, mostly string instruments. So then a little bit about Nathan, her husband. He was actually born in Russia in 1891, so there is an age difference. He immigrated to the U.S. in 1906. He came with his mother and his younger sister. Actually, on the poster in there, I have a mistake. I think he came with his father, and his father died. His father had already passed away. As I was looking through the immigration records, it said his mother was widowed. His mother, Anna, was widowed when they came. They left from a port in Scotland, came to Ellis Island. On the paperwork at Ellis Island, it said that his mother, Anna, had $12 to her name. And their destination was to, I can't ever say it, Chelsea, Massachusetts, where they'd be staying with her brother-in-law. So she had to get her and her two children from New York, Ellis Island, to Massachusetts on $12. I can't even imagine. I mean, that's, like I said, I'm still obsessed with the story. Eventually, somehow, they settled in St. Louis. I haven't figured out the connection there. I imagine probably family or friends is how they ended up there. But Nathan didn't stay long. By 1917, he was in Ardmore. And again, I don't know what brought him to Ardmore. Probably family or friends. While he was there, though, he joined the National Guard for World War I. He ended up at Camp Grubner in Henrietta. And he liked it so much he stayed. So Nathan stayed in Henrietta, and he opened a dry goods store. You can see here an ad for his business. Free hat, free hat, free hat. Anyways, be there, get you a free hat. He spent 10 years living and working in Henrietta. Again, he was part of the civic community there and the social life. He was a part of the American Legion. He was involved with the Masons. Everybody knew him. So he seemed to be really outgoing and personable. However, again, this decade here is during the Great Depression, the beginning of the Great Depression. Excuse me. Yes, the beginning of the Great, get my decades wrong. So his business starts to struggle. And he eventually has to declare bankruptcy in Henrietta, and he ends up in Conway. He declared bankruptcy in 1928. And again, I'm thinking he knew people in Conway, had family there, or other Jewish community members that he knew. So in Conway, he restarts, and again, American Legion, Masonic Lodge. He's active in the theater there in Kanawha. He produces plays, he acts in plays, he does music performances, singing, and playing the violin. So everybody knows him, everybody seems to like him. Shortly after he landed there, Bertha came a couple years later, and even though there was an age difference, it's not surprising they got together, right? They both had this immigrant Jewish history. They both loved music, and they both seemed to be really social people. So they became known for performing together, even on the radio. They would perform on the radio live. And there were other musically talented people in Kanawha that they would perform with as well on the radio. So by 1934, they got married in Bertha's hometown. On the poster in there about the Farbs, there's this article about their mock wedding at the American Legion. It is hilarious. So if you do nothing else, take time to read that. But it really showed you like their sense of humor, and they didn't take themselves too seriously. I was laughing so hard when I saw that. However, the good times unfortunately didn't last long. We're still struggling with the Great Depression at this time. His business, he has ups and downs, which Henry talked about in the video. This is a clip here just from the Seminole Producer, showing headlines at the time. So Jews were fleeing as Hitler moves closer to the city. Nathan became worried about his relatives. He lost touch with them, like Henry said. And so his emotional distress worsened between his business problems and everything going on in Europe, and losing touch with some of his family. And so, unfortunately, Nathan Farb took his life on June 4th, 1940. In his document, after he was listening to news broadcasts about the war, he turned off the radio, locked the door to his building, and shot himself. Where this story goes from here is going to blow your mind even more. The day of the funeral, the day of Nathan's funeral, well, hang on back a bit. I don't know if you can see here, but more than a crowd of 500 gathered in Kanawha to pay tribute to him. That tells you how well loved he was by the community. And I don't know if it made it on the poster there, I can't remember, but a local woman wrote a poem about his passing, and it was in the Kanawha paper. So the next thing of the story, the day of Nathan's funeral, according to the family, Bertha discovered she was pregnant. So I was researching the Farbs, and I ran across this article here about boy born to Mrs. Farb. I was like, wait a minute, what? So, what? And Henry confirmed that. And so we were able to track down Nathan Farb Jr. He is living in upstate New York. He's in his upper 80s. He's quite a character. But he did a series of phone interviews with us and gave us more information. And of course, he doesn't remember his father at all. He has photos of him. But he gave us some really good memories of his mother and how amazing she was. And I just love that picture. I wish we had a better quality of it, of Bertha and little Nathan. Nathan is a published photographer. That's what he does in upstate New York. And so Bertha, during the war, when all the men left, she was then responsible for all the music at Kanawha, including the marching band, which she had never done before. And so one of Nathan Jr.'s memories as a little toddler, she would load him up on the bus with the kids, and he would sit there and watch her march across the field and lead the band. So, and like I said, there's audio of that in there. If you scan, all of our posters have QR codes on them that you can scan and listen to or watch videos. Bertha stayed in Kanawha until 1944. At that point, she got remarried to a rabbi, and they moved to upstate New York. And she continued to teach for like 30-something years and appeared to have a happy life after such a hard beginning. So that's the story of the Farb family. All right.
So now we will move on to talk about the Katz family, which is, of course, where a lot of our research on the Jewish community in Ada and surrounding communities began. And, of course, thank you so much to the Katzes for coming this evening. So the Katz family of Ada's story mirrors a lot of the broader migration narratives of the settlement of Jews in rural America. The Katz brothers who founded the Ada store were part of a larger extended family with multiple retail businesses across Oklahoma. And this is where I should probably go in my notes to get dates right. So Jake Katz opened a store in Stillwater in 1896, and Lester Katz opened one in Sapulpa in 1910. And then Ben and Sidney Katz opened the Katz department store in Ada in 1926. And so this is a photograph of the Katz department store circa 1940s or 50s, and courtesy of the Katz family. So we can see their shop there. Oh, whoops, I forgot to read lots of my notes here. So why department stores? So Jewish entrepreneurs across the United States were prominent in retail for several reasons. A lot had experience in trade and textiles. My own grandfather, who was also a navigator in World War II, was a textile trader and merchant. His father was a tailor in Brooklyn. So a lot of Jewish families were in these trades. And so as they migrated to other locations to expand businesses and create new businesses, these were the trades they were creating them in. And department stores at the time really provided economic security and were a necessity in small rural towns without access to such. And so we have here the Katz family over on your right. The top row, we have Ben and Sadie Katz, and on the bottom row here we have Henry, also here with us tonight. I love this photograph, and I need to get you a print. I was able to enlarge this quite a bit. And so we have Henry on the left, his older siblings to the right, Brenna and Alfred Katz as well. And of course we have Henry on one of our early interviews with him holding a photo of his grandson. And so I just love these two photos together, showing those multiple generations of the Katz family. All right. And I feel like I didn't even go into close to enough detail in my talk because Susan went into such detail. I didn't know how much detail you're going to in the FARBs. The poster, please go see the poster in the other room. Please scan the QR codes and go to the Pontotoc County Genealogical and Historical Society's website. The videos are all hosted there. We have,
YouTube channel.
on the YouTube channel, sorry, on our YouTube channel,
Yeah.
not on the website. But they're linked on the website, right?
No, but I will do that.
We need to do that. Anyway, meant to do that. So we'll get those linked. So they are incredible. And so, actually, I'm going to go back to the slide for a minute. So the stories that Henry has told us, we could make an entire documentary just from them. And I plan to go further into those videos and compile some. That's one of the areas I'm interested in. But just to continue the story for a moment. So the Katz store quickly became a staple of Ada's downtown commercial district. It employed Ada residents. It sponsored community events, many of which you can see in the poster that were advertised in the newspaper or talked about and covered in the newspapers of the time. And then Henry and Alfred, Ben's sons, took over the downtown store in the 1960s. And then opened a second location in Arlington Center in the 1980s, which probably a lot of folks in this room recall. And the downtown store closed in 1989, while the Arlington Center store continued until 2004 when Henry retired. And these were huge institutions in Ada. Again, a small, rural, isolated community. I mean, one of the things when I moved here, I couldn't believe we were not on a major interstate. I'm from Norman. I used to live in the backyard of I-35. I can only imagine in like the mid-20th century what retail was like in Ada. Without these sorts of department stores, it would barely exist. So a huge contribution in business, and then also the Katz family were huge in serving the community and civic service as well. Other Jewish families owned retail establishments in Ada as well. The Gluckmans are another one that time was not with us on getting to know this family, and we plan to in the future still try to get in touch with those who are still alive and in the area. So Gluckman's was another department store, and many of the articles we've read show that the Gluckmans as well were big into civic service and giving back to the community, their employees, and I just love this photograph with the 1940s cars. We have a larger version also in our collection of the Pontotoc County Historical and Genealogical Society, which Susan pointed out. She's like, don't we have that too? I was like, oh yeah, we do too. But this one was courtesy of the Institute for Southern Jewish Life, which was also a fascinating discovery for me, that this was basically a project documenting Southern Jewish life, as it says. And I was like, oh wow, this is incredible. So they have a lot of information there as well if you're interested in this topic. Not just about Ada, but towns throughout the American South. And then the Harris Hotel, later named the Juliana Hotel, was originally owned by Jewish people of the name of Harris in Ada. And there were many articles we encountered as well in our research dealing with their hosting of many Jewish life and events, community events at the Harris Hotel. And it's a little hard to see here, but you can see this maybe, yes, actually better on that screen. Harris Hotel on the side here. This is from the early 20th century. I don't have an exact date on that one. Other Jewish-owned businesses included Ada Iron and Metal and other grocers, department stores, and we wouldn't know half of this information without Henry.
And I was going to add, Henry has made us a list of every Jewish-owned store that has existed here. And at some point, we will get that published. Actually, I would like to do a little map in anyways, but future plans.
Yes, yeah, the project doesn't stop here.
Yeah, it doesn't stop here.
But it's fantastic that we get to present it in this form that it is tonight. And Jewish Civic Service also included supporting things like scrap drives. Of course, Ada Iron and Metal is a logical connection to supporting metal scrap drives. Loved the typography here in this particular ad with the Win This War and the different materials that they were trying to collect. All right. Other Jewish business owners in the area, like Abe Pollock, helped to found the B'nai B'rith Association here in Pontotoc County, and other members of Jewish businesses served in the military itself, as we can see from some of the clippings we have on the screen. Captain William Gluckman of the Gluckman family served and was a recipient of the Purple Heart. Max Soroff, an owner of another of the Jewish-owned businesses in Ada, the Leader Shoe Store, served as a medical corps in Alaska. And then just the legacy and preservation of Jewish history in Ada. So thanks to the stories that Henry has told us and the ability to take those pieces of information and then research them further, the Pontotoc County Historical and Genealogical Society now really has a nice collection of this community and the era, and that legacy is preserved through family photographs from the Katz family in particular. Thank you, Marcia, so much. Store records, advertisements, and of course the oral histories that Henry has shared with us as well. And so, in conclusion, Ada's experience of World War II, through its upgraded airfield, participation in rationing and victory gardening, community mobilization, and its experiences with social tensions even, shows how deeply the war was a part of everyday American life in this era. And thank you. Thank you to all who have made this project possible. We have so many of you here tonight, including the Pontotoc County Genealogical and Historical Society president and several of our members. We came to Marion very, very early in this project and said, how do we get access to your photographs? And she said, well, you could come to a board meeting.
And we haven't left yet.
And we haven't left yet. So, so thank you to the Historical and Genealogical Society. Thank you to Ada Public Library Director Jolene Poor and the Ada Public Library, who has helped immensely with our project and hosted our exhibit. Do you want to read any of these?
Well, the Jewish one, the Katz family, of course, is here in Henry, and then the Buxton family. The list is not all-inclusive. We know we're forgetting people, just like we forgot Lisa Bratcher. So if we left you off the thank you list,
we are so sorry if we left you
we're
off
so
the thank
sorry.
yous, yes.
But the main thing I want to point out is we have a long list of student collaborators on this project, and so one fun thing about being professors at ECU and this project, and with it being media related, students have been able to get hands-on experience. They've gone to interviews with us, they've asked the questions, they've done the recording, they've done some editing. Poor Mallory had to read all those World War II letters.
In cursive, no
In
less.
cursive, in cursive. And so, also, the other person I want to point out is Lauren. Lauren, raise your hand.
Yes, Lauren George in the front row here, yes.
So Lauren is now an alumni. She's graduated, but Lauren came up she came up with our original poster designs, our color schemes, and our fonts as part of her honors project. And so she got us started, and it wouldn't look as good in there without Lauren, and she's extremely talented.
Yes.
Of course, we think all of our students are extremely great and talented, but
If you need graphic design work, hire Lauren.
yeah, I hit Lauren up. Yeah,
She does a wonderful job.
She does a
Yes,
wonderful job.
Yes.
But yeah, so.
Yeah.
And I know we've gone an hour and we said we were in it, but we have, if anybody wants to do Q&A, I know Henry said, are you willing to answer some questions? Maybe?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to make one little statement.
Please.
Please do.
And
Sapulpa, when they put the store in there, oil, the Tulsa oil boom. And that brought in, the professional oil people were from Pennsylvania and West Virginia. And there's just a whole influx of the engineers and everybody. And it brought the Catholic into Sapulpa. And they formed the Ku Klux Klan, and my daddy ran out of sheets.
That's a new one. And so this is just a prime example. We learn new stories every day in this project. So we're gonna need to interview you again and get that on film. Well, actually, I guess technically we have it.
Yeah, we have it on film.
We're filming. Oh my gosh. Oh my.
That's hilarious. Thank you for that
Thank
statement.
you,
Henry.
yes.
Okay, well, we will be around if you want to talk one-on-one, and I know Henry will be around for a little bit, but also think he wants to go look at the exhibit as well.
Yeah, so we encourage you to go see the exhibit itself, both ours and the Holocaust Museum.
Thank you for
Thank you for
coming.
coming.